First of all, thanks for the invitation and the opportunity to present our project here. Very happy to do so. And yeah, we basically going to go through what you just said in a little bit more detail and then have a discussion. But before we begin, so let's see, where's my why is okay, now it's working. So before we begin, we ask you all to get your smartphone out because we will need it later. And so if you already do that now, that would help us immensely because at the end, we want to have a discussion with you, as we said, but we want not really like only have it moderated by us or by you guys from Kaeur Studio, but also by the project itself and by the AI that we're using. So we will interact at the end of our talk with a set prototype. And yeah, so if you could already get out your phones now, that would like maybe save us a little bit of time later. So just put it next to you on your desk. And we will basically go through a few points here. So first of all, I mean, you already heard who we are now, but we will like just show you a few more pictures with it, I guess, and give you a little bit more detail. Then we will also shortly introduce the project again and tell you what it is about. How did it start then? Like, how did it like the different iterations that we've like gone through by now? Then obviously we have to clarify why we like chose knots and what's like the whole story behind that. And Nayeli will give you more insight on her artistic research on knots and how we integrated that into our project. And also how we use AI, right? I mean, this is after all a symposium about artificial intelligence, and our project is heavily relying on that and plays with it. So obviously we also will talk about how we do that. And then we will give a little outlook of where we want to go in the future. And then you can, as I already said, try out yourself the prototype with the virtual prototype of the AI, talk to it, and then we can all talk together. So who we are, I mean, I will not read out all this again, obviously, but simply speaking, we are like a team of 3 people, Ambika, Nayeli, and I. And Nayeli and I, we are based in Berlin, and we know each other from Lacuna Lab, which was already mentioned, which is a space here in Kreuzberg that, you know, is kind of like at the intersection of art, science, and technology. And we co-founded that in 2015. And then we met later, Ambika, during the project. And she is from India, and she is the creative coder, and she will explain a little more in detail her work. And I will just show you a little bit of what I usually do. So let's play the video. Turn this off. Okay. So yeah, I'm as I already said, like I have an interest in my artistic work that is more on outer space related, and so I work on, you know, like with space research. I work with the space agencies as well. For example, on a project with the European Space Agency that you can see on the right, which is currently in space, actually on board the ISS, which is a gallery with artworks of different artists. For the next 10 months, this is going to be there. And then my art also, I bring these kind of shapes and materials and functionalities into the exhibition space and work with, yeah, kind of like emerging technologies. So for example, augmented reality, or yeah, here with this other one in the at the bottom, which is based on the Webb Space Telescope that recently launched. You know, it's about like combining projection and LEDs and light, and how do we interact with light, stuff like that. And yeah, so it's basically interactive installations on outer space, but most recently it also turns a little bit towards space in general, and more like how can we like interfere or influence the reality and our perception of it. And with that, I'm going to give it to Ambika.
Thanks. Can you guys hear me okay?
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yes, it works well.
Hi, I'm Ambika. I'm also known as Computational Mama. I've been exploring code and teaching it since 2017, and my sort of work has been around the idea of looking at embodiment, looking at the idea of care, and also looking at how AI and physical computing can be sort of part of this. Much of it is an integration of computer vision and postnet detection and little bits of text and generative text along with it. I also run a live stream which is called Coding with Friends, where I bring in women creators from across other creative sectors, and we learn how to code together on projects. This has through the help of the Processing Foundation in the US, done 2 seasons with about 7 episodes each. Yeah, that's about it.
Hello, my name is Nayeli. I'm also based in Berlin. I am trained as a designer. I'm also an artist. And I am basically working with 3D worlds. I am also using a lot of 3D technologies. And currently I am working in my research Codes in Nodes, which I'm going to talk about further, in the All River and Species Act 2021, which will be presented in Fibre Festival and Holland Festival in June, and Subterranean Matters, which is another project in collaboration with Humboldt University and Matters of Activity. And I am very interested, very focused on representation, like digital and physical representations. So I am also part of Lacuna Lab, as you said, and I am also very interested on working with technology, but with women, with feminist perspective, and also I am searching for understanding more what is going on behind some technologies. So I think that's it from my side.
All right, great. Thank you. So, so then we move on to the next section. Like, so what is not a conversation about? So, as you can already take from the title, we are working with knots, and we are trying to initiate a communication. This communication is with the help of AI systems that we use, and we have based it on the Quipu nodes that, yeah, Nayeli is going to tell you a little bit more later, but you can already see it here. This is kind of this like system that is used to store information, social activity, and all this in nodes, and then you can like read it out again and communicate with that. And we thought of like, how can we use this and encrypt information with the AI and get it out and have a conversation of the AI with itself. And this whole project, so that you can like imagine it a little bit better, we also have a little video that I'm gonna play right now.
Intelligence, we are using these technologies such as GPT-3 to generate some answers to questions we posed about what is the relation between creative activities and how could be impacted by artificial intelligence.
we created that prototype of an AI-based sculpture that is using Quipu, which is a system that the indigenous people used to communicate and store information in knots. And we built like a knot-based sculpture, and every knot is an embedded question that can be decoded by the AI. The AI generates an answer to that question. All right. Yeah, so this kind of sums it up really what the project is about, and gives you a nice little overview about like also the aesthetics and everything and how it's like yeah, looking. But before we you know, ended there, we obviously had to start somewhere, and so the whole idea for the project was kind of built during the CoLab Fellowship in late 2020, October and November 2020, which was an online fellowship that was funded by British Council and Goethe Institute in Bangalore. And we then met there with like 23 other fellows from Germany, UK, and South Asia. And we basically learned and collaborated together on AI and machine learning. Many of us haven't had okay, there was like mixed kind of knowledge about it. So some already worked in it in the artistic practice, others had no idea. And so we spent like basically a month together and learning about it and experimenting. And in the end, that led to 8 working prototypes, which you can like see if you follow the link here, which we can also drop in the comments later if you want. And yeah, there you see some of the projects that are very different from ours, but we actually came up with the idea of Not a Conversation, and it was born there. And obviously, in that time frame, we kind of couldn't like do everything we had like that we thought about, but we kind of set it on this like virtual prototype first that we created that we will also later use to engage the conversation with you guys. And it kind of uses knots and neurons as like a sculpture element or a visual and conceptual reference. And as you can see, we kind of started with a like mirror board where we collected all kinds of thoughts and references and how we kind of like can use the different professions that we all, or like knowledge that we all bring in together to come up with something unique. And then we made this, like had this idea, okay, we want to make this sculpture and we actually want to build it, but we couldn't. So we, because of its online and restrictions during COVID and everything was like far away from each other. So that was our first iteration. And it was basically a proof of concept and to like demonstrate that it's working. And we also initially intended to like also have it as an open process that we kind of like incrementally can develop further. And so this one only worked with a set of static GPT-3 generated answers and wasn't like as interactive as the current version is, for example. So then we made the first actual physical prototype, and we completed the original concept during the transmediale Vorspiel exhibition in February 2021, which was part of an event series at Laguna Lab, which was called Scattered Partners, in the frame of the Vorspiel Transmediale. And here we introduced the enhanced digital version where we had like real-time GPT-3 generated conversations. And we also made this physical structure for the first time, this prototype, and which then could be yeah, which we then, you know, exhibited. So a little bit like the process, we kind of like 3D printed the individual parts. We like had manual labor as well, right? And so as I said in the beginning, the project revolves about artificial intelligence, labor, and creativity. And we also wanted to kind of reflect that in the production process. So we used like different, you know, forms of labor, different approaches of like how we can achieve things to, yeah, to bring in creative momentum. And then we made a documentation that you saw. So, and most recently, we also showed the project at the India Art Fair in from like just now 28th of April to 1st of May. And we were hosted again by BeFantastic, who invited us, well, who were like also organizing the fellowship back in 2020. And they showed a collection of interactive digital artworks there. And with a focus on artificial intelligence and machine learning, and not a conversation is one of the projects that they represented out of this like COVID-19 related collaboration. So for this, we refined it again a little bit. We overall made the whole sculpture larger. We also, like, instead of having it hanging, we put it on a pedestal, and so that people could go around. We replaced also the material a little bit, made it semi-transparent to give it more this like neural like look from the neurals that we initially had envisioned. And then we shipped everything over to India, where it then was exhibited here on the booth of the art fair. And as you can see, we also had a little demonstration of the digital prototype and the whole project itself. So, and with that, that's kind of like the story that has happened so far. And now Nayeli is going to tell you a little bit more about like why things are the way they are.
Okay, thanks, Thomas. Yeah, well, I'm going to give this introduction on why are we using the knots. So this is based on my ongoing process. This is an artistic research, which is based on an artifact, on an ancient artifact. So I started this research with the question on how some textile artifacts were used to transmit information. Can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so during my research, I found out about different artifacts used before the colonial times that were precisely used for communication purposes. There are many examples, but I am going to focus right now in the Quipus. So as it was mentioned, the Quipus are knotted strings, and these knotted strings were created by Andean people. It is said that it was created in Inca times, so geographically situated in Peru and Chile and other parts. But it was documented that maybe they were used even before the Inca times. And these strings were important for administrative purposes. So it is said that it was the way to communicate among municipalities. The importance, like these strings called my attention because in those times there were like it is the way of communicate, not in the written form as we know it, but it was a way of storing the information, which is very interesting for me because it is one of the examples of how an empire can function based on artifacts. So these artifacts are based on knots as well. And I am also interested on this symbolic use. not only for administrative purposes or for counting, but also for describing events, for storing narratives. And it is also like a very, I would say, like a very important artifact to be explored, to get to know more about and other cosmovisions, other visions and perspective of the world. The quipus possess different properties, material properties. Everything in this artifact has been used for coding information. So it's like the material, the color of the chords, the spin applied, the direction of the knots, the positioning of the chords, the type of knot, the thread color, the chord length, everything all in all, it is part of a code. So until now, we still don't know with certainty what is the message inside these artifacts, but there are some approaches to what could be the intention for using this chord during Inca times, after Inca times, like in the colonial period, but even after the colonial times, they were still used. It is documented that maybe until 1960s, these artifacts were important. So with this research, I am also trying to approach to a perspective that is like a non-European perspective on asking what would be technology, what are the technological artifacts, and it's the digitalization, for example, like the digital information wouldn't necessarily be based on screens, but also for example, with the quipus, the quipus are multi-dimensional, like three-dimensional artifacts, because everything, it is important, like and the message is encoded on knots, which are three-dimensional, the colors, everything. So it is all in all very important. So in this quipus and these artifacts from early researchers, there were identified three kind of knots, three knots that will be there will be a relation with numbers, like in a decimal system from 1 to 10. So here you can see the three main knots. Can we go to the next slide? So with these knots, I started to find out how to not take the shape of the quipu as it is itself, but to make an interpretation. And for me, it is also very interesting to work with the knots, because I was asking myself what can emerge from the practice of noting, and from where does the practice of noting emerge. And besides their material function of tying a string and other materials together, the knots can also fulfill a symbolic purpose by serving as metaphors and concepts for theoretical reflections, as well as functioning as visual or haptic symbols representing a specific meaning. But also because the knots are very important in the development of textiles, in the initial development of textiles, but also architecture. And here I found, while making my research and trying to create an abstraction of these knots, that there's this also catalog of knots, which are called the mathematical knots. And there is some equivalence among the quipu knots and the mathematical knots, which is going to be important in the work here in Knot Conversation. Can we go to the next slide? So in my research, I am using these knots to convert them, transform them into different shapes. And with these shapes, what I am doing is to create a kind of language that is going to be an encrypted language. And this is gonna be based on the direction of the knots, what material is used for the knots, which color, what is the size, the position, and all this together combined will be messages. So in the diagram that where you see this mesh made of knots, it is like a manual way of coding. because it's also like I am creating a code, like I am inventing this code where I am saying, okay, I assign these values to these nodes based on the material properties, but also digital properties. Can we go to the next slide? So for this, in this project, in codes in nodes, I am also using open source software as it's processing for my initial codings, Blender for the 3D visualizations, and Notplot, which is another software used by mathematicians to create nodes, when you can also play there and create your own nodes and explore them. And with this, there is a process of going through these curves to three-dimensionalize them and play them with different textures, which are also important on my research to start encoding messages. Can we go to the next slide? And also in my research, I am exploring the physicalization of these experiments through two kinds of 3D printers. So like the 3D printer, the traditional 3D printer as we know it with filaments, but also multi-material 3D printers to play with also with the material properties, as it's different elasticities, the colors, and embedding texture over texture. It is like a very playful process. In the photo, you can see that I am stretching a mesh of nodes, and these nodes were created initially with code, and I got the curves. The curves were three-dimensionalized and then just 3D printed, because also it is important in this project to play with the nodes in a way that they could also function as meshes that can be flexible and playful at the same time and interweave. But it's also a symbolism of how to make questions about technology, about how my approach as a woman of color playing with these technologies, trying to create the languages and embedding or encrypting messages into these surfaces, and what is the result of these explorations. So I think that until this is it, and unfortunately we don't have enough time to go through like the details of this, but at the end, if you have more questions, I'm happy to answer. Yeah.
So it's me now. Okay. So how do we work with the AI? Of course, this is the kind of key thing that we three of us were interested in figuring out as a group, is that how can we collaborate with AI in this process? And it came together quite wonderfully in terms of how the sculpture works with the app that we've developed. The idea is like it's human eye computer vision on your phone goes to an embedded message on the knot delivers an answer back to you. So this kind of looping of human machine is what we've been like really testing and like stretching in every aspect of the project, every iteration that we've kind of been able to present it in. Thomas, do you mind going to the next slide, please? So the basic idea for the app has a very simple workflow. You open the, you access the sculpture, you get a link to open the app. It gives you permission, and you start exploring the various knots on the sculpture, and each of them is embedded with a question that we've, as a group of artists, given to embedded within each of those knots. Those are trained to know that specific question through image classification. And once the question appears on the phone, you can ask it to generate an answer. So at this point, the answer is generated by the generative text library and model GPT-3. So it responds to the questions by giving an answer. And so even though the questions are the same, the answers kind of change every single time. And the way we've tried to work the flow out is that at some point we should be able to take all of that gathered GPT corpus that we've got from the questions and see how we can like bring that back into the to the language, the generative language of the app. We can go ahead to the next slide, I think. So the base idea is very simple. It uses a simple and very wonderful tool called Teachable Machine. It uses MobileNet, I think version 2 still, which is basically looking at image classification. So it distinguishes between two kinds of images. So we add in all our knots as classes. Here's just a screenshot of me testing it on myself. But as you can see, the first prototype was very simple. It was Nayeli had built the knots. She gave us these videos and we just tried to see what kind of responses it gave. Occasionally also giving the same response for different knots, or two different responses for the same knot as well. We can go ahead to the next slide. So as we were building out the project and the app, I think it started giving us very interesting ways in which it was responding to us, almost in this very childlike, human-like way, where, you know, it's thinking that I'm not 4, even though I trained it on a knot, but it's perhaps because I'm wearing a yellow jacket, and that particular knot which we had assigned was a yellow colored knot. But what's interesting to see is that in our sort of imagination of what an AI is and how it responds to us, we assume it to take a stance which it will in which it will embody itself and answer in that same way as if it's answering for itself. But the truth of the matter is that all of the text is generated by corpuses, and the corpuses were written, and you know, it was human produced text which is being used. So here you can see when we pose the question, how can we begin with code and machine, the response almost seems as if it's a human response, but also it has this very wonderful surprise sort of element to it, because you don't expect this the machine to respond to you by saying that computers don't feel emotions, and nor do they understand what memory and trauma is. So these are some very interesting formats which are coming out for us, and the questions themselves were posed and very rooted in terms of our own practices, in terms of understanding creativity, in terms of understanding labor, in terms of understanding kinship with machines. These were the sort of questions that we were posing to ourselves, and then therefore posing to the machine. And from there on, I think we can go to the next slide. So as we were, this is more of like behind the scenes of the building of the app. But once you're in the app, your walkthrough will be pretty simple. This is a sort of camera view that you'll get. You can aim your phone camera to any of the particular knots in the sculpture, and it will push this small question like, what is, here it says, what is artificial creativity? And as you say, generate answer, it will take a bit of time, and it will generate an answer from the GPT-3 corpus. So this has been sort of very interesting for us to see how the answers have changed, how it's responding, what it means, whom does it sound like, you know, does it sound like someone we know, or does it sound very much like, you know, a gang of Reddit people? Like, does it sound like, you know, does it sound authentic? Does it just sound like it's blurting out other kind of, you know, verbatim things from academic things that it may have picked up in its corpus? So, and as we are also exploring it, I find that over the course of the more than a year plus that we've been doing this project, the responsive have also have kind of changed in some senses. Can we go ahead to the next slide, please? Thank you. So these were our original sort of questions on the left, which you see, which we kind of very like painstakingly formed ourselves. And very quickly, GPT-3 tries to answer them, and we've kind of started collecting that corpus of answers that are very focused on the continued questioning that we have been doing with it. So these are also available. After I've spoken, I'll just post the link as well in the chat, or maybe we can do it. I don't know, Thomas, however you and Nayeli want to plan it. Maybe all links together at the end. And then closing on to the last slide about the AI. Can you go ahead, Thomas? We kind of started sort of putting all of it together in a concordance, or like what is known as a tag cloud, just to get a sense of what kind of words are coming out in terms of relevance and in terms of popularity. This cloud isn't just like, okay, the word came out like 100 times versus 2. It includes relevance in context of each other in terms of the entire corpus. So as you can see, some words are very prominent in terms of what we are asking, like machine, creativity, algorithms, process. These not only reflect the conversations around this, like that we think, I mean, we are having independently, but also just the entire corpus of text that, okay, these are the conversations that people have had around AI, and that's why it's responding in this kind of tone and in this sort of similar way to us. So what we are trying now is to take some of these keywords and locate, if at all the AI GPT-3 has given us, say within its response, another question. And we are trying to now see how we can re-embed those questions as another layer onto the knot. Because I think at the base of the project, it's always the knot. It's always going back to that idea of embedded knowledge, just like how it was within the Quipu knots. It's not just, some kind of ornamental aspect. It has this sort of very deep-rooted knowledge within it, which we are trying to sort of almost mirror in a way. And where we are going ahead with this, Tomas, maybe. Should I? Yeah, so I mean, aside from this, of course, it's everywhere in the news. DALL-E 2 has come in, and it seems to be sort of almost in tune with us. And I think maybe like we don't have to do any more art direction work anymore. But the responses are very interesting in terms of how it, like when I write, okay, mathematical knot as a glass sculpture. So it gives very very similar images as what we might have imagined in our mind, or knots in a 3D printed sculpture, Quipu knots. So it's given the second one or the third one, where we were just exploring what it would say if we said knots and human neurons, which is also sort of playing on the idea of how the sculpture's form was originally built. But it's very interesting to see how the AI has kind of brought these images forth to us, and we are trying to see how we can maybe incorporate this back into the project at a later stage. So
Exactly.
Tomas, you want to take over?
Yeah, thanks, Ambika. Exactly. And so maybe also just to give a little bit of an outlook. So we are currently like thinking about version 4 and where that can go, right? And for this, we are looking into creating images from this, like the keywords that we collected through the communication of the AI itself. So again, we are trying to really have the AI have a focused conversation with itself, actually different AIs in that case then. And we are trying to make a larger version for this BeFantastic Festival in Bangalore in early 2023. And then also kind of like have it like human scale and maybe more of a immersive experience where you can like walk inside, interact with the knots, and also have like more audiovisual interaction or like input, I would say. So yeah, that's kind of like the outlook, and this is yeah, where we currently are, and yeah, we're developing this concept right now, and we're happy to show you what we have here. With that, it's time for you to try it out yourself. I would say, as I said, we have this prototype for you that we reactivated. So maybe Ambika, you can drop the link in the comments real quick if you haven't already. I don't really see the comments right now. So the process is as follows: you click on the link on your computer that will lead you to this to this digital version of it, where you have the I mean, I can. No, I'm not going to demonstrate it right now. So there you have a QR code in the top right corner, which you have to actually scan with your phone camera. And this will load the app on the phone in your browser. You don't install anything. It's just like a browser-based app. So with that, you can actually then interact with the virtual prototype. And I would say would be nice if maybe we can like do this for 3 or 4 minutes, and in the meantime, we can already have a little bit of a discussion with like prepared questions from you guys from the Kaeur studio, and then we see where that leads us, if like people bring in maybe interesting aspects and answers for that.